listeners, welcome to the U.S. Military Defense Channel by subscribe to our channel. You can be informed about detailed reports every time. Tensions and conflicts in the east of Europe also affected the Mediterranean in the Middle East. The reason for this tension that spread to the Middle East is thought to be the pressure exerted by Russia on the USA and Israel through Syria. Russia, which did not want the USA in the region for a long time, started to make moves against Israel, an ally of the USA, on the eve of the Ukraine conflict. After the conflict environment in Eastern Europe, a great tension prevailed, especially in the Mediterranean. The Neptune Strike 22 exercise carried out by the North Atlantic Alliance in the USA infuriated Vladimir Putin, and Russia began to take drastic measures again against the USA. The exercise led by the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier from the 6th Fleet of the USA in the Mediterranean and supported by the HMS Prince Wales aircraft carrier was interpreted as a very harsh move against Russia. For this reason, Russia suddenly took a very harsh move towards U.S. and Israel presence in the Middle East. At least 6 warships and 3 nuclear submarines of Russia bound to the Syrian port of Tartus have been operating in the Mediterranean for a while. In addition, with the arrival of 6 more Russian warships a few days ago, the strength of the Russian Navy in the Mediterranean almost doubled. Along with this port, Russia also threatens the USA and Israel with the air bases it has strengthened in Syria. In response to Neptune Strike 22 in the Mediterranean, Russia immediately retaliated and conducted naval exercises simultaneously with China and Iran in the Oman Sea. At the same time, Russia unexpectedly launched a large-scale aerial provocation on the Golan Heights, one of the most critical regions in the Middle East. According to the statement made by the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Russian SU-34, SU-35 MiG-29 and MiG-23 fighter and bomber aircraft carried out an unexpected raid on the Golan Heights in a large-scale attack exercise. Tensions and conflicts in the east of Europe also affected the Mediterranean in the Middle East. The reason for this tension that spread to the Middle East is thought to be the pressure exerted by Russia on the USA and Israel through Syria. Russia, which did not want the USA in the region for a long time, started to make moves against Israel, an ally of the USA, on the eve of the Ukraine conflict. After the conflict environment in Eastern Europe, a great tension prevailed, especially in the Mediterranean. The Neptune Strike 22 exercise carried out by the North Atlantic Alliance in the USA infuriated Vladimir Putin, and Russia began to take drastic measures again against the USA. The exercise led by the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier from the 6th Fleet of the USA in the Mediterranean and supported by the HMS Prince Wales aircraft carrier was interpreted as a very harsh move against Russia. For this reason, Russia suddenly took a very harsh move towards U.S. It is known that in the Russian air raid, land and air targets were hit and the Israeli air defense was activated. This sudden air raid by Russia on the Golan Heights, which is the most sensitive area for Israel, caused great concern in Israel and the USA and was seen as a retaliatory front opened by Russia against the USA. First of all, we will try to answer the question of what this move by Russia to one of Israel's most sensitive points means for the United States. Later, we will examine the striking details of the controversial Golan Heights air raid by Russia against the USA and Israel, together with the official statements, and we will dwell on the impact and meaning of this in Israel. The reason for this sudden provocation by Russia against Golan Heights needs to be examined much more deeply. With the escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, Russia started to form new fronts in many different parts of the world. The first thing that comes to our mind as the missile shipments to Cuba and Venezuela, next to the warships and nuclear submarines that suddenly appeared on the shores of the USA. Again, with Russian warships sent from the Baltic Sea in front of the United Kingdom off the coast of Ireland. Russia is giving a clear message with the Russian Navy exercise and the naval exercises in the Pacific. But here, the Middle East is in a very critical position at a point where Russia attaches so much importance to the Mediterranean. It seems essential to protect the Mediterranean ports by attracting more allies. The choice of the Golan Heights as a target came with the decision of the joint patrol of the new Russian-Syrian Air Force, which was determined on the Israeli border. Russia and Iran have been at odds over Syria for a while. However, when Russia could not prevent the alliance of the USA and Israel with the agreement it made with Israel, it started to support the Iranian-backed militants in the region again. With its patrols with warplanes on the Israeli border, Russia, which prevents Israel's air attacks and air defense, will also prevent attacks on Iranian-backed militant groups. This will facilitate the movement of Iranian-backed militants in the region. As you know, the IDF bombed the headquarters and shipments of Iranian-backed formations in Syria, inflicting great damage on Lebanon-based, Iran-backed terrorist militia groups. With this support from Russia, the Iranian-backed militants seem to be able to easily carry out new attacks on U.S. bases in Israeli regions, while EU-US bases were shown as the main target. With this move, it is a fact that the relations between Russia and Iran in the region are getting better day by day. Iran's inconclusive exit from the Vienna talks in prolonging the process also helped, and with a strong alliance it will establish with Russia, it will be able to create a great chaos in the region. It is not known exactly what the U.S. will do at the moment, but it stands ready to prevent Russia's invasion of Ukraine with its large armored shipment to the Ukrainian border and thousands of troops. Considering that the U.S. Navy is fighting the Russian Navy in all seas, EU-US can leave Israel alone against Russia in the Middle East. Russian SU-35, SU-34, MiG-29, and MiG-23 fighters frightened Israel with an unexpected raid on the Golan Heights, against the background of the fact that Russia still does not recognize the transfer of the Golan Heights under the control of the Israeli army and as a response to the uncontrolled attacks of the Israeli Air Force on Syria. It became known that a large group of SU-35, SU-34 and MiG-29 and MiG-23 completed a raid on the Golan Heights. It is known that Israel activated its air defense systems, but only after the combat aircraft were able to approach the strike distance. At the same time, the IDF did not dare to attack the Syrian MiG-29 fighters because of the risk of shooting down Russian aircraft. At the same time, it is alleged that Russian and Syrian pilots practice strikes, not only against ground targets, but also against air targets. The Syrian Air Force received updated MiG-29 fighters relatively recently. Moreover, it is argued that these combat aircraft can easily withstand the F-15 and F-16 fighters, and it is these combat aircraft that are used by Israel to strike at the territory of Syria. According to Russian Ministry of Defense, Syrian fighter jets joined Russian fighters, strike aircraft, and radar planes on a mission that took them partly on a provocative course that included skirting the Golan Heights in what seems to have been a very deliberate signal to Israel, which occupies this strategically important region. The first joint air patrol mission of this kind to have been announced by the Russian Ministry of Defense involved Syrian Air Force MiG-23 Flogger and MiG-29 Fulcrum fighter jets together with Russian Aerospace Forces Su-34 fullback strike aircraft and Su-35 flanker multirole fighters in a 50 mainstay airborne early warning in. Control a W&C aircraft. The much-depleted Syrian MiG-23 fleet, in particular, is only rarely seen in action after years of action in the country's ongoing civil war. While the Syrian MiG-29s, despite their appearance, have been modestly upgraded and have seen more use of late. The Russian types have all been deployed to Syria regularly since September 2015. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, quoted by the Task State-run news agency, the Russian aircraft departed their main hub at the recently expanded Khmeimim Air Base in Syria is western Latakia province, while the Syrian jets were operating from Seko and Dumair airfields outside Damascus. Together, the aircraft flew along the Golan Heights and over northern Syria, including the Euphrates River. The highly tense Golan Heights serves as the armistice line with Israel, which is also currently waging a campaign of airstrikes against targets in Syria, primarily related to suspected Iranian and Hezbollah positions. During the patrol mission, Syrian pilots controlled airspace and provided fighter cover while Russian crews practiced attacks on ground targets. A statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense. The statement added that Syrian pilots practiced hitting targets with air-to-air missiles, while their Russian counterparts struck ground targets at a training range in central Syria. The two countries' pilots developed skills for cooperation in various situations, the statement added. These kinds of joint missions will now take place on a regular basis. Flights were carried out along the Golan Heights along the southern border of the Syrian Republic. Alexander, the commander of the SU-34 unit, told TV the Russian Ministry of Defense, is official television station. Today, for the first time, we flew in unified combat formations and established interaction with Syrian Arab Republic pilots. We understand each other perfectly. Most recently, T's Air Base, also known as T4 in the central Homs Governorate, has begun to receive additional Russian fighter jets in the shape of MiG-29 SMT Fulcrums, although it's unclear if they will remain here on a more permanent basis. While Russian air power continues to support Assad's forces, today's mission along the Golan Heights seems to have been intended to signal intent to Israel. According to Russian sources, MiG-29 fighters will be used to patrol the areas of the Palmyra-Abu Kamel and Palmyra, Deir Zor highways. However, it is quite remarkable that, judging by the latest data, the Russian aerospace forces are armed with Syria, did not have MiG-29 fighters, which does not exclude the transfer of additional combat aircraft to the Arab Republic. Moscow did not come to Assad's aid with its air defenses in Syria after Israel allegedly attacked the port of Latakia recently, continuing the Russian policy of not fighting back against Israeli airstrikes. With that in mind, it's also possible that today's mission, and any more to follow, are intended primarily to reduce the tensions that very likely exist between Assad and Russia over this continued policy of inaction. The big question now is whether the air patrols Russia as embarking on are merely symbolic and will occur during the day as a show of force, or whether they are designed to actually send a message and potentially interfere with Israel's actions. It is known that the Trump administration supported Israel's actions in Syria. However, U.S. officials also were concerned that Iran and its proxies in Iraq and Syria might attack U.S. forces in retaliation for Israel's actions. In fact, in 2018, Iranian factions in Iraq began to accuse Washington of working with Jerusalem and also began to hint that Iraqi-based militias could target the Jewish state. Moscow also released more statements critiquing Israeli strikes. The news of the Russian patrols appears to be a message about showing off that the Syrians and Russians will work closely to project power and impress upon the world that Syria has sovereignty over parts of the country. Even though EUS has bases there and Turkey occupies part of northern Syria. Moscow and Damascus want to send a message of strength to former Syrian rebels in southern Syria who work with Russia. The message may not be directed at Israel or not solely at Israel. Most reports of Israeli airstrikes in Syria occur at night. Deconfliction also means potentially making sure the patrols occur with Israel's knowledge. Israel's advanced radar can also detect them. The major question mark is whether these patrols will embolden Syria's regime and Iranian-backed elements in Syria. Iran could use them as cover to attack Israel or use its proxies to strike at EUS in Israel. This could be one part of a multi-stage Russian operation to assert Syrian regime sovereignty. Eventually, that could lead to potential friction.